Okay.
Hey guys, my name is Bugaj, and I'm one of the senior research specialists here at the Landscape Evolution Observatory within Biosphere 2. And today we have a special treat. I'll be taking you on a ride above the Leo landscape. This is an exclusive tour experience as we are closed until further notice. But what we're standing in right now is called a gantry system. And when this artificial hill slope was designed, we designed it with the intention of being able to sample from above. And this is a landscape. It's basically a soil laboratory, so we don't want to disturb it by walking over it. This system allows two people to fly over it in any XYZ axes. So without further ado, I'm going to raise this up if our camera is ready. And here we go. Now, when we add plants to this landscape, this will allow us to move over the landscape and sample things like photosynthesis and transpiration. As you can see now, though, our landscape is still barren. And what you're looking at is about a third of a football field worth of crushed basalt. And this basalt was mined from a crater in northern Arizona. And we chose this basalt medium. It was particularly interesting to us because when basalt interacts with water, we start to see the breakdown of some fine minerals. And this breakdown leads to additional nutrients added into the system. And we're interested in this weathering process for several reasons. One, basalt can actually be known to sequester carbon in that weathering process. Two, we're interested in the evolution of what we call homogeneous systems as they move toward heterogeneous systems. And the way I think about homogeneous and heterogeneous is homogeneous means the same type of soil, the same type of soil behavior. And as we start to weather on this landscape, we're very interested in seeing how this homogeneous soil starts to behave more like a heterogeneous soil, whereas what's happening beneath our feet starts to be different based on location within the landscape. So the way we test that evolution, we use sprinkler systems. And I'll move us over to a sprinkler head array. With the gantry, we're going to go forward first. Now, all along the sides of this landscape, you'll see our sprinkler array. And we designed this so that we could actually apply a variety of rainfall regimes onto our landscape. And the first prerequisite for that was, well, we want our artificial rain to land uniformly across the entire landscape. So when we first built this landscape, we actually placed about 500 cups across the surface, rained on them, and made sure that we were raining the same amount of water volume in each of the cups. And you can imagine how tedious of a process that might have been. So once we have our rain system calibrated, the next step was to add atmospheric instrumentation. And as we're moving upslope here, you can see that we've got these atmospheric masts that aren't touching the soil, but they come just above the soil. And at different axes, different levels, we have these replicated sampling systems that contain several different sensors. On the left side of the crossbar arm, you can see a small black nub. That's a PAR sensor, which stands for photosynthetic active radiation. That's measuring the incoming light resource that plants can use for photosynthesis. And that beehive-looking thing is called a humidity and temperature sensor. And to the right, this black sensor, that's a wind anemometer, and that's measuring wind speed and direction. So what these atmospheric masts do, they give us a readout just above the soil and much higher in this greenhouse structure that allows us to kind of get a larger picture atmospheric behavior. Because what we do on the Landscape Evolution Observatory is called a whole water balance and carbon balance and energy balance of the system. When we balance a landscape like this, we take into account all of the atmospheric interactions. So when you think about landscapes, you might not think about all the microbes within the soil that are respiring. So you can think of this carbon coming out of the soil as those microbes are respiring. And then you've also got carbon going into the soil when plants are photosynthesizing. Well, this instrumentation above the soil allows us to see some of that exchange. And as this landscape evolves, as this landscape becomes more heterogeneous in nature, we might start to see changes in some of those processes, whether it relates to carbon or evaporation of water off of the soil surface. Now, below our feet, we have embedded in the soil thousands of sensors. And we can't see those sensors, but at different meter marks along the sides of the soil, and you might be able to see some of the red meter marks along the soil's edge. Those represent the sensor stacks that we actually got an underbelly view of the other day. But now we're above, and we can kind of see where this water might start to draw down towards this seepage phase. So the kind of experiments that we initiate here on the LEO project, we use isotopes. And isotopes are helpful because it allows us to basically add a signature to a body of rainwater that we apply on the landscape. And that signature is very subtle in the sense that it behaves the same way that regular water might, but it's traceable. So back in 2016, we did our first major experiment on all three of our landscapes. We're in the center landscape now, and we've got an east and a west landscape that are identical in nature and build. And back in 2016, we rained for about 45 days straight. And when we rained, we injected several pulses of isotope tracer in the middle of those scattered rain events. And that allowed us to basically measure the transit time distribution of that body of water as it followed its course into the soil, downslope, and then exited the landscape. Now, that's interesting to us for a number of reasons. When we think about subsurface hydrology, here in Arizona, we relate that to rainwater restoration and kind of the infiltration of water, as it might be thought of as a resource to revitalize our groundwater aquifers. So, science are interested in what's happening to the rain as it falls on the landscape, as that compares to different landscapes at different geographic elevations, under different types of plant cover, under different temperatures and various stresses. Well, one thing that we've known from some of the hydrology that's been conducted at the University of Arizona is that water that falls at our kind of ground level, equivalent to about the township of Tucson, around 2,000 feet. Well, it gets so hot in the summertime that those monsoon rains, they evaporate very fast. As compared to some of our more mountainous regions in the Catalinas that you might be able to see through the window here, when water falls up there, it's actually protected by a variety of factors. You've got biological factors like trees and plants that are shading that landscape, and that water infiltrates and is actually retained at a much higher rate than water that might fall down here in the lowlands. Now, LEO is used as a model landscape to kind of, basically a reference model to think about those kinds of factors and changes. You can hear the sound of a canyon wren echoing through the greenhouse right now. Occasionally a bird makes its way inside the biosphere, but we do a good job of bringing it back out. It's a beautiful call, my favorite. Going back to the way that we model subsurface hydrology. Lost my train of thought, but we'll get back to it. In short, what we can do here at LEO at a scale that can't be replicated anywhere else, we can three-dimensionally track subsurface water, nutrient, and carbon movements as it travels through the subsurface. So that's pretty cool. And we'll take this data of these water molecules pinging off our thousands of sensors underground, and we'll create these really interesting three-dimensional animations. So you can think of it as almost taking a time-lapse snapshot of underground water flow. If you have any questions, please look further at our website, biosphere2.com, and comment below, and I'll do my best to answer them after the live session. Thank you so much for joining me up here, and we look forward to having you guys on another live session tomorrow.
Aaron, you do have someone on here that works at Manzo that had some kids do mini LEO. Do you want to highlight what that was real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple years ago, and in a continued collaboration, we've partnered with Manzo Elementary, and some of our students down at Manzo were actually looking at what plants grow in these smaller LEO beds. And because we haven't added plants to the landscape yet, we're interested in what kinds of plants take to this nutrient deficient landscape first, as kind of a first successional species. So we partner with elementary schools around Tucson to help us figure out what plants are best suited and any other insights they have from their hydrology experiments down at school.
When might you be planting plants on LEO?
Well, science is driven by heavy funding, and we have a couple of proposals in the works right now. One might be leaning towards looking at a basalt landscape as a reference to a more Hawaiian type of landscape, because basalt is volcanic in nature, and we know that we have these beautiful basalt lava grounds in Hawaii. Another is looking more at landscapes from the point of view where we might think about restoring degraded landscapes and using plants to kind of increase nutrient availability in the landscape. So from that sense, we're thinking about, within our proposal, we're looking at more native species. And both of these proposals are under review right now. And when those come in, that's going to drive our timeline for adding plants. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been a blast. It's getting a little hot in here, so we're going to head back down and tune in for tomorrow's live session. Thanks so much.